Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's time for another episode of Kings of the North here on the Lions Grid. We're now through 5 weeks of NFL action, Joe, so we're going to take a look here at the updated records, and let's start out here as we dive into the NFC North. Let's take a look at the results from last week's games. So you can see up on the screen now, we have, and that shouldn't say at Philly, that should say at Dallas for Green Bay, but getting the win 34-24 in Dallas. Of course, our Lions were on a bye, and that should also not say versus Chicago. I'm just dropping the ball all over the place today. Minnesota with the 28-10 win. I updated the scores, I just forgot to change the teams, it looks like. Getting the win against the Giants, and then the Bears getting the 21-24 loss. Oakland was the home team, Joe, but of course that game was actually played over in London, so they were the home team, but really no one was because it was played overseas. Joe, of those three games, of course the Packers were playing that big NFC battle against the Cowboys, a pretty hyped game between two teams that we both had towards the top of our power rankings. I think the most surprising for me, though, was actually that Bears and Raiders game where, it wasn't surprising necessarily that the Raiders won. It was more, I was surprised in the manner in which they did win, and that was by running the ball against that Bears defense that has been very good against the run so far in this season. It was surprising to see them have so much success running the ball against them because, again, that Bears defense doesn't typically give up rushing yards like that, and the Raiders were able to find success.
Yeah, I didn't catch much of the games on Sunday. Lions on the bye. I took the bye. So just kind of didn't catch too much action, but I was able to see the scores. And one of my feelings that I had about Oakland was that they would want to prove that because they lost Mac, because they've lost Antonio Brown, does not mean that they're just some run-of-the-mill team that's going to play average football for the rest of the year. I think with 1 year underneath John Gruden's coaching structure and then another year into the season after dealing with all that stressful stuff with Antonio Brown, they were finally able to focus on team football. And with a quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, out at the QB position, there was opportunity for Oakland to take advantage of an inexperienced quarterback and, exploit those weaknesses and be able to capitalize. It was a close game. They only won by a few points, but they did come out and they did put up more points. They held them to fewer points than what they had. And they were able to get a good win against a good football team and put on a show in London. I mean, who doesn't like the iconic teams that go over to London? You got the Lions, you got the Raiders. They've even done games in Mexico. They've even done games with other teams like Miami back a few years ago in London. Not sure who it was, all throughout the time they've been doing the London games, but I mean, some of these teams that are, considered bad in the USA, like not historically good within the last 20 years, are winning overseas because they're in a new atmosphere, a new environment, and they're just iconic teams of the NFL. And, it's good to see Oakland represent the Oakland Raiders with a W over a good historic Chicago Bears team.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see, how these teams would be impacted. Obviously having to travel all the way to England to play a game, and then travel back. Luckily for both teams, though, in this situation, they're both on the bye here in Week 6, so both the Raiders and the Bears get an extra week here to recover after a game being played there in London. So nice for them in that regard, but yeah, it was certainly... the Bears, I think they scored all 21 of their points in the third quarter. The Raiders were more consistent throughout the game. I think they put up points they only scored in the second and the fourth quarter themselves. But, definitely the Bears defense they made some plays, but at the end of the day, it was surprising to see the Raiders have so much success running the ball. Joshua Jacobs ran the ball 26 times for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I think he was averaging 4.7 yards per carry. So that's that's quite a bit of success against a defense that otherwise played a pretty good game there. And then taking a look at the other results, of course, the Packers against the Cowboys. Surprising that the Packers did have quite a bit of success on the ground themselves as well. Aaron Jones finished that game with 19 carries, 107 yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns with an average of 5.6 yards per carry. So they really moved that ball on the ground. They had their 2 best quarters were the first and third quarters, where they put up 14 points in each of those, and then they had a field goal in both the second and fourth quarter. So they put up points in every quarter, which is definitely a recipe for success. But that defense really took it to Dak Prescott. I know he ended up throwing 3 interceptions. There were some fumbles in that game. There was also a good amount of sacks and QB pressure. So certainly going to be interesting. Obviously, the previous week when the Packers took on Philadelphia, that defense, which had been playing really well in the previous weeks, sort of fell by the wayside a little bit there against Carson Wentz and the Eagles. So interesting to see them come back here and respond positively against the Cowboys. Of course, we'll have to see how they do against the Lions, who have that, of course, coming off their bye, have a whole week to prep and get ready against them. So it's going to be interesting. Are we going to see the Packers defense that we saw against the Cowboys, or are we going to see something more similar to what we saw against the Eagles? Certainly, how they play could really impact the outcome of that Packers-Lions Monday Night Football game.
Oh, yeah. Now you look at the teams of the powerhouses in the NFL, which we'll get to later on this week, and we look at Green Bay going to play Dallas and putting up like 24 consecutive points, I think it was, in the third quarter. They just completely dominated the Dallas Cowboys. And that's what I tuned in. I tuned in to that game in the third quarter, and they were just winning and winning and winning. And I was like, this is a team that I thought was going to be more successful. They have a go-to wide receiver, a number 1 running back, and a developing quarterback. So, what they did is that they, did end up coming back in the game, but they were just too far behind to come back and win that game against Green Bay. Now Green Bay sits atop of the NFC North, and it's like, wow. Detroit saw what they did to Dallas, saw that they lost to the Eagles, and now they're like, okay, now we have to go into Lambeau on Monday night, and we're supposed to play this team has become, top 5 at least, top 3 in some people's books of best teams in the NFL. You wonder, the new coach takes over the reins of Green Bay and is now having immediate success. So obviously it's working, and Detroit has their hands they have a lot of work to do to try to get a win against Green Bay and get back into contention for the division.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it'll be a challenge. And then just wrapping out Sunday's games, just talking briefly about the Vikings. Of course, they got that 28-10 win against the Giants. There was a lot of rumbling. Stephon Diggs being unhappy with his role in the offense. Adam Thielen upset about some missed opportunities. And they came out and they definitely made it a point to have Kirk Cousins get the ball into the hands of both Thielen and Diggs. Thielen ended up with 7 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, so he had himself a pretty fantastic day. Stephon Diggs had 3 receptions, so he didn't get the ball quite as much, but they still at least got it to him for 44 yards. And it was definitely nice to see that Vikings passing game get going a little bit. Overall, Kirk Cousins finished that game with 306 yards on going 22 of 27 for 2 touchdowns. So Delvin Cook, of course, did a fantastic job running the ball again. He ran the ball 21 times for 132 yards, which is 6.3 yards per carry. Doing a really great job on that front. And then, of course, their defense did a very good job of preventing Daniel Jones and that Giants offense from being successful. Of course, Wayne Gallman, the running back who was filling in for Barkley left that game with an injury. And so they sort of, at that point, with him going out, they went to a running back by committee thing, and that running game never really got going, which hurt them. And then they fell behind, so they couldn't throw the ball, or they were forced to throw the ball, and it just was a good situation for the Vikings D, and they took advantage of it. But it's interesting again to see the Vikings rebound here as well, because after that loss to the Bears, it wasn't looking very good. It thought maybe they were going to be the weak link in the NFC North, and I think really from top to bottom, and we'll look at the standings here for the NFC North, any one of these teams certainly still has a chance. Of course, the Lions here, they're still on that losing streak of one game just because they were off this week, so they couldn't address that streak in any sort of way. The Bears going on a one-game losing streak now after they were on that three-game winning streak. The Packers getting back in the win column, as well as the Vikings. So really close between all of these teams, Joe. You can see there, the three teams there, 6.25 win percentage, 6.0, 0.60, 0.60, and then the Packers sitting there currently in first place. Talking about that, or taking a look at that, and we'll actually just go ahead and throw up here the matchups for this upcoming week, Joe, so we can talk about them too. Of course, as we've been talking about here, the Packers going to be hosting the Lions for Monday Night Football, so that's going to be a big game that can impact those standings. And then the Vikings will be hosting the Eagles in Minnesota, and then the Bears are, like I said, are on a bye this week, so there won't be any movement from them. Joe, when we look at that Monday Night Football game, I have a question for you about it. Obviously, it's only week 6, so a lot of things can change. Even if regardless of the results here, there's still a long way to go in the season. But my question to you, Joe, is: will the winner of the Monday Night Football game also win the NFC North? Do you think whoever comes out on top of this game here, whether it be the Lions or the Packers, do you think one of them is the front runner for walking away with that NFC North title?
Interesting question. If Green Bay goes up 3-0 in the NFC North with a win already over the Lions only have one game remaining to tie Green Bay, then have to beat Chicago at least once, Minnesota at least once. You see Green Bay already having a win against Chicago and Minnesota, having a win against Detroit. They've already guaranteed themselves 500 in the NFC North. Detroit, meanwhile, hasn't. They would only have one loss or one win with 2 more games remaining to play as many teams as Green Bay has played. So that tells you that even if they win the game, they still have to win at least 2 more games against those opponents to tie Green Bay with the win total in the NFC North against the NFC North opponents. So I think if the Lions lose this game, I do not think they're going to win the NFC North. This is a must-win game for the Detroit Lions. They beat Chicago. They beat Minnesota, that being Green Bay. Now they have a chance to play Detroit. If Detroit really wants to step up and try to play against Green Bay and win the football game on Monday Night Football, they'll be making a statement to the NFC North and the nation, the National Football League, about them as a true contender to win the division. We'll get into playoff talk. We'll get into, all that other talk that comes with later on in the season. But we're not going to we're not going to say Detroit is there yet. But I think it's a must-win game for them.
Yeah, certainly. It's again, there's a lot of schedule left to go after this game. And to your point, Joe, I do think it's easier to say if the Packers get the win here because of the fact, as you mentioned, they've already played the Bears and the Vikings and already have wins against them this season. It's easier to say that a win here for the Packers does help them helps them more towards the ability to claim the NFC North title, just because they already have wins in the division. And to your point, the Lions, this is their first NFC North action. They'll still have 4 games against the Vikings and the Bears combined, and then they'll still have that 5th game against the Packers. Whereas the Packers at that point will be 3-0 through their first 3 of their 6 NFC North games. So it certainly puts them at an advantage. And with the Lions, there's a lot more uncertainty, right? Because, again, they haven't played these NFC North opponents, so there's certainly an opportunity there for things to go sideways depending on the outcomes of those games. So I think in terms of making it more definitive, it's much this win does more for the Packers in terms of securing an NFC North title, but I think it is an important game for the Lions, to your point, in that, you know, you want to get this win here, because if you don't, you're letting the Packers get out to a really big lead in that division battle, and at that point it might be hard to catch them, and at that point the best thing you're hoping to do is compete for a wild card. So I think it's important for the Lions in terms of not letting the Packers get too much of a lead, but at the same time I think it, you know, a win for them, as we've talked about, doesn't secure as much for them just because this is their first of 6 NFC North games. Whereas for the Packers, it starts them out 3-0 in the division on top of their success they've had against non-division opponents. And it really, at that point, seems like it's the Packers' division to lose. And then the other teams are just going to be competing for that NFC wildcard spot.
Yeah, you know, if they lose this game, they're not going to win the division, and you know they're going to be competing for a wild card spot, which isn't, you know, a bad thing. Last time Detroit won a division was '93. I don't remember it, never saw it. So, you know, it'd be a change, you know, a change after 16 years. That would be fun for Detroit to get a division win against all their opponents and get a division championship, go into the playoffs, have the first playoff game at Ford Field. That would be exciting football.
Yeah, certainly would be I think good for Lions fans, and yeah, I mean it's I don't think by any means not getting the division win, I don't think that makes the season a bust. Obviously, I think things changed, right? Our expectations heading into the season, I want to say you had the Lions projected to go 6-10. I had them projected to go 8-8. So, you know, just the fact that we're already here and we're thinking that they're more likely to make the playoffs than they were at the beginning of the season certainly suggests that here in the early season they've had success. I think really the big thing for me that I'm looking for is, you know, obviously having the bye week so early is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you get to get healthy before you have this big primetime game against a division rival. The downside is that then you have to play 12 consecutive games to end the season. So I want to see them make the most out of the fact that they had the bye week, right? I want to see them come out and look like they took advantage of that time and got prepared here to play the Packers because, you know, again, the downside is you have to play 12 consecutive games, so you really have to capitalize on the opportunity that extra time gives you to prepare because this is a big game. You know, it's, again, I don't think for the Lions, them getting the win here doesn't necessarily suggest they'll win the NFC North, but it goes a long way to making sure the Packers' lead doesn't get out of control because if the Packers do start 3-0 in the NFC North, I really do think it's their division to lose. So, yeah, I'm looking to see the Lions come out and capitalize on this extra time they've had to prepare against the Packers because, you know, historically Matt Stafford hasn't had great games in prime time. So I want to see the Lions come out and be competitive here because they certainly are going to have everyone's attention because, you know, again, what was it last week? USA Today had them as their 4th rated team in their power rankings. People did start to take notice of them after they played that close game against the Chiefs. Here in week 6 against the Packers, it's a chance to prove that they are a team with a legitimate chance of winning this NFC North and that they can really be the kings of the North. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode. Obviously, tomorrow is Wednesday, which means that we'll be doing our Power Rankings episode, Joe. So we'll take a look at our top 5 and the top 5 of some of the various media sources we keep an eye on, that being ESPN, NFL.com, CBS Sports, Bleacher Reports, and USA Today, just to see where they're all at. and we'll get a better pulse on the overall NFL standings. But I think in terms of the NFC North, it's very close. Again, we'll toss up the rankings here, or the standings. All these teams are very much in the hunt. So the games that are left on the schedule, especially for the Lions, having, of course, this week they'll be playing the first of their 6 NFC North games. There's certainly a lot to be figured out in this division. These teams are very close. They're the only division in the NFL, Joe, that has all teams with a positive winning percentage. So, it's going to be a battle, and it's going to get settled on the field. And we're lucky this week that we get a pretty good Monday Night Football matchup with the Lions headed to Lambeau to see if they can make it 5-0 since we've been doing the Lions grid.
Yeah, if Detroit ends up winning 6 games against the NFC North, that's going to move their record to 8-1-1. Not, all at once, but I mean, they'll have a total of 8 wins, and they'll have a total of 10 games played with 6 games remaining against other opponents. So it's like, wow, if Detroit just handles business in the NFC North, they're shoo-in for the playoffs, for winning the NFC North, having a good record, home field advantage. Who knows? Maybe 2 games in the playoffs. You win the first one, you play the second one. Then who knows? You never know. They could have a good season this year. They continue playing like a team. I'm starting to believe in Patricia as the head coach, and getting good vibes from him. So, it should be a fun showdown for Monday Night Football.
Yeah, it's certainly still plenty of reason to be optimistic in the season, and just got to take it one game at a time, because it's going to be a battle for that NFC North title. So we'll get our first taste of it here on Monday night. If you did enjoy today's show, please do help the channel grow. Hitting that like button or the subscribe button if you haven't already done so to the channel is a big help. And while you're at it, if you're subscribing to the channel, why not hit that bell that's right there as well, so you get a notification when we're going live with our videos. As we've mentioned, tomorrow we'll be going live with our Power Rankings episode, and of course the rest of the week we also have a variety of different episodes available for you. So if you want to get an alert in your browser on your phone when we are going live, make sure you ring that bell, and those notifications will get sent straight to you. Until we talk tomorrow when we do our Power Rankings video, I'm Kevin Marheine. He's Joe Wilmot. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.